given the most remarkable, devoted service to the Queen, to my family, and to the country, and also to the whole of the Commonwealth.
The room did not erupt when the announcement was made. It went silent. That was what made it terrifying. Prince William, trained from childhood to withstand pressure, betrayal, ceremony, and scrutiny, found himself unable to answer when King Charles confirmed the decision that would shake the royal order. Archie was being granted a historic royal title, placed above every other child of his generation. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William did not move at first. He sat opposite Charles with one hand fixed around the edge of a folder, as if paper alone could hold him steady, while the ground beneath the monarchy shifted. The king spoke softly, almost gently, and that made the moment cut deeper. He was not shouting. He was not defending himself with anger. He was speaking like a grandfather who believed he had finally found a way to heal a wound that had stayed open too long. But the prince heard something else beneath every careful word. He heard George being pushed into comparison. He heard Charlotte, Louis, and Lilibet being pulled into a royal order they had never chosen. And he heard Archie's name, innocent and unaware, becoming the center of a decision far bigger than childhood. Charles understood the weight of ceremonial royal precedence, the formal order that decides who is placed above whom during royal events, processions, seating plans, and symbolic family moments. This was not just a sweet family gesture. This newly revived title carried old power, old meaning, and old danger. It placed Archie in a position no one had expected, above the other children of his generation in ceremonial standing, and that made the room feel colder with every second. William looked down at the signed paper and saw that the choice had already been made before he entered. The ink was not waiting for his approval. The file was not there for discussion. It was there so the heir could be informed after the crown had already moved. A sealed palace note changed everything. Charles slid it forward without ceremony, and William opened it with the slow caution of a man who already feared what he would find. The note showed that the title had been prepared quietly for weeks, with senior voices bypassed and expected consultations never held. The king had not stumbled into this. He had planned it. He had protected it. He had signed it before his son could object. William's shock hardened into something quieter and more dangerous than anger. He finally rose, but no answer came. Charles watched him stand, carrying guilt and hope in the same tired face. And as the silence stretched between father and son, one question became impossible to ignore. Who had convinced the monarch this was the only way to restore the family? But before William could challenge the decision, the true emotional battlefield shifted toward the people whose names were now trapped inside the title's shadow. Behind every royal title is a child who never asked to become a symbol. Archie's name now carried history, privilege, and danger all at once, while George, Charlotte, and Louis were suddenly pulled into a comparison they could not understand. What Charles saw as healing, William saw as disruption. What Meghan and Harry received as recognition, Catherine feared would become a wound inside her own children's future. The shock did not stay inside the room where the king had signed the order. It traveled through the family like a cold current, touching every name attached to the crown. Archie, still too young to understand the storm forming around him, had become the unexpected center of a royal decision meant to pull the Sussex line back toward history. For Charles, the title was a bridge, a grand gesture of blood and belonging. For William, it felt like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples toward his own children before anyone explained what those ripples meant. Catherine felt the danger before anyone said it aloud. She waited until the corridor emptied, then asked William the question he dreaded most. Had George been told? The prince did not answer. His silence said everything. George had been raised with care, protected from what waited for him. Charlotte and Louis had been sheltered too, allowed to be children before monarchy tried to define them. Now another child's honor threatened to become a comparison, and Catherine could imagine the whispers that would follow. Who stood higher? Who mattered more? Who had been favored? Harry received the news with a guarded heart. Part of him felt vindicated, as if Archie had been seen by the family that had kept its distance. Yet the timing unsettled him. Why now? Why this title? Why this sudden warmth after years of bitterness? Meghan understood the hidden burden instantly. Honor inside the monarchy never came alone. It carried expectation, obligation, and invisible strings. The same institution they had walked away from now seemed to be reaching toward their son while tying him back again. Then came the whisper that sharpened the crisis. A senior aide revealed that the announcement order had been arranged, timed so the palace record would change before William could stop it. That detail transformed pain into suspicion. This was no family surprise. It was a maneuver. And as everyone absorbed the shock, attention turned toward the private moment that had pushed Charles into making the decision no one could undo. And the deeper everyone looked, the clearer it became that this title had not been born in ceremony, but in a single painful moment no one inside the palace had forgotten. Every royal crisis has a moment that looks small, until history turns back and marks it as the beginning. For Charles, that moment came during a private garden meeting at Windsor, when Archie looked at an old family crest and asked a question that pierced through years of distance. Why did some royal names seem to belong inside the palace, while others seemed kept at the edge? Charles carried that question long after the meeting ended. He did not answer it properly when Archie asked it, because some questions arrive too gently to reveal their danger at first. The king had smiled, paused, and chosen careful words about family, history, and belonging. But the child had already done what adults inside the palace often failed to do. Archie had cut straight through ceremony and reached the wound beneath it. The Windsor Garden conversation became the private trigger no one understood until it was too late. Charles later returned to his desk with the question still pressing against him. A historic title, in plain terms, is an old royal name or rank passed down through family history, often carrying symbolic power beyond its wording. The title chosen for Archie had remained dormant, meaning unused and deliberately untouched, because it carried precedence implications, the kind of ceremonial importance that could change who stands where, who is named first, and who appears to hold greater symbolic weight. That was why previous advisors had left it alone. It was not forgotten, it was avoided. The king stood alone beside his writing desk and repeated Archie's question under his breath. He felt guilt settle into him, heavy and familiar. Charles knew what distance had done to Harry. He knew what silence had done to Meghan, and now he feared that the same cold line was reaching toward their son. That fear drove him into a private review of ancient titles, not because he wanted to disrupt William's household, but because he wanted to answer a child with something stronger than apology. He wanted action. He wanted proof. William learned about the garden conversation later, and the news struck him harder than expected. The prince was not cruel toward Archie. He did not deny the boy's pain, but he believed Charles had allowed one emotional exchange to outweigh years of careful succession discipline. A handwritten note in the king's file made the motive unmistakable. No grandchild should feel exiled by blood. Those words revealed Charles completely. They were tender, they were dangerous, they were the heart of everything. William stared at the note and felt restraint begin to crack. The Windsor Garden conversation had not stayed a family memory. It had become the foundation for a constitutional-style decision, a royal act, dressed in healing, but powerful enough to unsettle the future. What began as a grandfather's promise was now becoming a confrontation between a king desperate to repair the past and a prince determined to protect the future. The confrontation did not happen in a grand hall or before advisors. It happened behind a closed door, with no cameras, no courtiers, and no ceremonial language to soften the blow. William entered as the heir. Charles waited as the king. But the moment the door shut, titles vanished, and what remained was a father and son, standing on opposite sides of one devastating decision. William did not begin with anger. That made the meeting more dangerous. He entered carrying the signed confirmation of Archie's new title, the file held low at his side, his expression controlled in the way only deep hurt can control a man. Charles watched him carefully, already knowing this was not a routine royal disagreement. This was personal. This was dynastic. A dynastic matter, in plain terms, is one that affects not just one person, but the future shape of the royal family itself, especially the line of inheritance, rank, and symbolic power. And William understood that perfectly. The prince placed the file on the table and asked one question. Why had George's symbolic position been disturbed without warning? His voice stayed measured, but the strain beneath it was impossible to miss. He did not accuse Archie. He did not diminish the child. He spoke instead as a father trying to understand why another father had made his son's future feel less protected. Charles answered with quiet tenderness, saying Archie deserved acknowledgement, that the boy had carried distance he never created, and that the crown had a duty to heal where blood had been wounded. But every gentle word only left William feeling more alone. Charles believed he was explaining compassion. William heard confession. The king admitted the decision had moved quickly because delay would have invited resistance, debate, and pressure from those who wanted the dormant title buried forever. That admission changed the air between them. It meant the speed was not accidental. It meant Charles had known opposition would come, and he had chosen to outrun it. The prince looked down at the signed file again, understanding that he had not been invited into a decision. He had been placed in front of its aftermath. William then revealed what he knew. The title had been registered before he was consulted. The palace record had already shifted. Charles did not deny it. He only lowered his voice and said some choices had to be made before fear could silence them. For a moment, neither man spoke. The king looked like a father, asking to be understood. The prince looked like a son realizing trust had been broken in the name of healing. Then William pushed harder. Who had encouraged the urgency? Who had shaped the timing? Charles hesitated, and that hesitation carried more weight than any answer. In that pause, one name began to hover over the argument. Camilla, and whether she knew more than she had said. The confrontation left both men wounded, but the greater shock came when William began tracing the influence behind the king's impossible choice. Power inside the monarchy rarely announces itself. It moves through suggestions, silences, and carefully timed words spoken when a monarch is most vulnerable. Charles believed he was acting from conscience, but William began to suspect the decision had been shaped by more than guilt. Somewhere behind the title, behind the paperwork, behind the sudden urgency, someone had understood exactly how to reach the king's heart. Charles had not reached the decision in isolation, and that realization changed everything for William. The prince began looking beyond the signed file, beyond the formal wording, beyond the careful palace language that made every shock sound controlled. A private recommendation memo, in simple terms, is a confidential written advice note prepared for senior royal decision-makers before a major choice is finalized. This one suggested Archie's title could reset public sympathy around the Sussex children and soften years of royal estrangement. Those words did not sound like a grandfather's grief. They sounded like strategy. Camilla sat across from Charles during one quiet breakfast, weeks before the announcement, and her words later became impossible to ignore. She did not command him. She did not appear to pressure him. She simply urged him to think first as a grandfather, before thinking as a sovereign. The queen consort understood his regret. She understood how deeply Harry's distance had cut him. And because she knew where the king was most tender, one gentle suggestion could carry more force than a loud demand. Charles heard comfort. William later heard influence. The palace advisors had been divided from the beginning. Some believed the title would become an act of reconciliation, a bold sign that Archie and the Sussex line were not being left outside the family story. Others feared it would break the delicate generational balance that had protected George, Charlotte, and Louis from rivalry. That balance mattered because the monarchy survives on order as much as emotion. When one child is raised higher in ceremonial meaning, every other child is dragged into comparison, even if nobody says it aloud. William received the account from a trusted aide and felt a cold shift inside him. Rage did not come first. Disappointment did. The prince understood that Archie's honor could be genuine and still serve another purpose. It could make Charles appear generous, wounded, and forgiving, while leaving the heir to absorb the confusion inside his own household. That was the cruelest part. Success for one branch of the family could become suffering for another. Charles had wanted healing, but the machinery around him had turned healing into theater. William saw it clearly now. The title was no longer just about Archie. It was about sympathy, legacy, timing, and control. And once the announcement began moving through palace channels, no one could slow the force of what had been released. And when the first consequences arrived, they did not come through official statements. They came through one child's question and one mother's breaking heart. The palace could manage newspapers, statements, and ceremonial language. It could not manage the silence at home. Catherine understood duty better than most, but even duty has a breaking point when children are pulled into adult decisions. The moment she saw William's face, she knew this was not another royal disagreement. This had crossed into the private space where monarchy and parenthood collide. Catherine did not ask at first. She watched William carry the news into their household like something too heavy to name, and the silence between them became its own confession. The prince was controlled in public, but at home, control looked different. It looked like a man choosing every word, because the wrong one might turn pain into panic. He had faced duty, pressure, ceremony, and expectation since boyhood. But this was different. This was about George. This was about Charlotte and Louis. This was about explaining a royal decision to children without making them feel measured against another child. William finally told her what had been signed, and Catherine understood the danger instantly. A palace statement, in plain terms, is the official wording released to shape how the public understands a royal decision. This one praised unity, healing, and family repair, but it avoided naming George directly. That omission struck Catherine harder than any open insult. If Archie's title was being called historic, if it was being placed above the others in ceremonial standing, then George's future needed clarity, not silence. The monarchy could speak warmly about one child, but it could not leave another standing in the shadow of carefully chosen words. Catherine sat beside William after the children had gone, and her question came quietly. Would people now question George's future because they did not understand the difference between title and destiny? A title could bring honor, but destiny carried the long road of kingship, duty, sacrifice, and public burden. William heard the fear beneath her calm voice. He admitted he was not angry at Archie. The boy had done nothing wrong. That truth made the wound sharper, because the prince's anger belonged elsewhere. It belonged to Charles, who had forced innocent children into symbolic rivalry while calling it healing. Then Catherine found the line that revealed the deeper design. A draft speech prepared for Charles described Archie's new place as a bridge above division. The phrase was soft, polished, almost beautiful, but Catherine saw what it meant. The title had not only been granted, it had been framed. It had been prepared as a public act of mercy, a way for the king to appear generous, while William's household absorbed the private shock. Catherine did not break. She steadied the room. Her quiet resolve forced William to see the choice before him. He could react as a wounded son, or he could answer as the future king. From that silence came the first real shift, not inside an office or council chamber, but in a private conversation where William finally stopped reacting and began deciding. The turning point arrived without witnesses. No aides stood nearby. No secretary took notes. William and Catherine spoke as husband and wife, not prince and princess, and in that quiet exchange, the future of the monarchy changed shape. Rage could have made William louder. Fear could have made him colder. But Catherine asked one question that forced him to choose legacy over injury. William had stepped away from the palace response process because every official sentence felt like another trap. Courtiers wanted language. Advisors wanted calm. The institution wanted speed. But the prince needed something none of them could give him. A reason not to let anger become his answer. Catherine understood that before he said it. She knew the pressure on him was not simply political. It was human. It was the pain of a son who felt shut out by his father, and the fear of a parent who saw his child's future pulled into public comparison. Catherine sat with him in that private silence and asked what George would learn if his father answered hurt with bitterness. The words landed differently because they did not challenge William's pain. They honored it, then asked him to rise above it. George, she reminded him, needed to see strength without cruelty. Charlotte and Louis needed to feel secure without being taught resentment. And Archie, despite the storm around his name, was still a child. If William challenged the title publicly, the wound would spread from one branch of the family to every child beneath the crown. William softened, not because he accepted what Charles had done, but because he finally saw what retaliation would cost. A public challenge, in plain terms, would mean openly questioning the king's decision before the nation, turning a private family fracture into a royal crisis. That might satisfy anger for one day, but it would damage George, humiliate Archie, and deepen the very division Charles claimed he wanted to heal. The prince could not let his own injury become another child's burden. So William chose dignity. He prepared a short private message to Charles, measured and sharp enough to carry the truth without becoming an attack. He made clear that George's future would be protected, that Archie would not be publicly diminished, and that the monarchy could not repair one child's place by quietly unsettling another's. The message was not rebellion, it was warning. It told the king that healing built in secrecy was not healing at all. It was pressure disguised as love. Catherine watched him send it, and in that moment, the palace calculation changed. William had refused the easy path of outrage. He had chosen restraint, but restraint did not mean surrender. It meant the future king had found his line. The family had chosen silence for the sake of the children, but the public would not stay silent. And by morning, the monarchy was staring at a storm it could no longer contain. By sunrise, the decision no longer belonged to the palace. It belonged to the country. The title became a symbol people argued over at breakfast tables, on broadcasts, outside palace gates, and across every royal column. Some saw compassion, others saw chaos. But one image captured the national mood, a newspaper front page showing Archie's name above a shadowed portrait of William, with one word beneath it, upended. William watched the coverage without speaking. The prince did not flinch when Archie's name was praised, because the child was not the enemy and never had been. What wounded him was the way George's childhood had suddenly become part of a national comparison, as if one boy's honor had to be measured against another boy's destiny. The palace statement, meant to sound calm, had only sharpened the debate. It confirmed the historic title and its ceremonial precedence, meaning Archie would hold a higher symbolic place during certain royal occasions, even though George's future as heir remained unchanged. Charles had wanted the announcement to feel generous, but generosity turned into spectacle the moment the public saw what it implied. Broadcasters called it the king's boldest family move since taking the throne. Royal commentators argued late into the day, some calling it a healing act, others warning it could destabilize the delicate order that keeps the monarchy from turning family affection into public rivalry. Every sentence seemed to pull another child into the argument. Archie became the symbol of recognition, George became the symbol of protection, and Charles became the monarch who had tried to repair one wound while exposing another. Harry felt the storm differently. He saw crowds forming near Buckingham Palace and felt a rush of pride that Archie's name was finally being spoken with honor. Yet pride did not erase unease. The Duke understood what it meant to become a banner in someone else's battle, and now his son was standing in that same dangerous light. Meghan sensed it too. Recognition had arrived, but so had scrutiny, expectation, and the heavy cost of being claimed by a family that had once felt painfully distant. Then came the public moment that defined the day. Outside Kensington Palace, two handmade signs rose above the crowd. One read, "Protect the heir." The other read, "Honor every grandchild." Those 5 words on each side captured the split better than any official statement could. By evening, one prominent broadcaster delivered the line that echoed everywhere. Charles has not just given a title, he has redrawn the emotional map of the royal family. The palace had lost control of the meaning. William understood that silence alone would not be enough now. As the debate reached its peak, the monarchy needed one final message, and his response would decide whether this became a rupture or a reckoning. The world had chosen sides. The palace had lost control of the story, and only one final act of restraint could decide whether this became a rupture or a reckoning. In the end, the title did not destroy the monarchy, and it did not heal it completely. It revealed it. Charles had acted from guilt, love, and longing. William had answered with restraint, pain, and discipline. Archie had been honored, but also burdened. George had not been displaced, but he had been reminded too early that destiny can feel lonely even before it begins. William met Charles one final time, with none of the fury people expected. The prince had every reason to raise his voice, but he chose something sharper than anger. He chose truth. George's future constitutional role, meaning his formal place in the line of duty and eventual kingship, had been publicly reaffirmed by the palace. Archie would keep the historic title, and George's path would remain unchanged. Yet that did not erase the damage. A child's place had been honored, yes, but another child's security had been placed under public question. And William knew the monarchy could not pretend that pain was only a misunderstanding. Charles listened without interrupting. The king had presented the decision as family recognition, a way to show Archie that blood still mattered inside the royal story. But the monarch now understood that recognition handled in secrecy can wound the very people asked to support it. William told him plainly that love could not be repaired by surprising those left to carry the consequences. He did not accuse Archie. He did not attack Harry. He did not punish Meghan through silence. The prince made one thing clear: no child should become a weapon in royal reconciliation, no matter how noble the intention sounds. Catherine's quiet influence stood behind every measured word. She had been the steady force who turned William away from retaliation and toward authority. Her counsel had protected George from bitterness, Archie from humiliation, and the family from an open war that would have scarred every branch of the crown. Charles seemed visibly aged by that truth. He had tried to honor one grandchild and had shaken his eldest son's trust in the process. The pain in that room was not loud anymore. It was deeper than noise. The final emotional verdict was simple. Archie's dignity had to be protected. George's path had to be protected. And the monarchy had to learn that titles alone cannot hold a family together. Power without honesty becomes pressure. Healing without trust becomes damage. A crown may grant honor, but only wisdom can stop that honor from becoming a wound. And so the palace closed the file, not because the pain had vanished, but because the lesson had finally been written clearly. A crown may grant honor, but only wisdom can prevent that honor from becoming a wound. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.